Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me here. Okay. Is that working?
Yeah, it is.
Thank you so much for having me here and for listening to me. My name is Stephen Jaffe. I'm running. Sorry? My name is Stephen Jaffe. I'm running for the United States Congress in the 12th District of California, which is essentially 90% of the city of San Francisco. My primary opponent, I'm a Democrat, and my primary opponent is Nancy Pelosi. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I've been a lawyer for, believe it or not, 46 years. And for most of that, I've been an employment law lawyer. I represent employees only. I have probably handled over 1,000 cases in the last 46 years. I've represented, so far as I know, pretty much every person who is in a protected class of persons by the law, representing them as employees. The list is long. I think you probably all well know most of it. Age, race, gender, nationality, disability, religion, did I say religion? Gender, every single one of them. In addition, I represent people who have been retaliated against for doing what's called a protected act in their employment, and I represent whistleblowers who blow the whistle on their employers and get retaliated against them for that. I'll tell you about, I think, a few of the most interesting cases I've had because shed some light on who I am and what I do. The longest trial I've ever had was 3 months. It was in the county seat of Contra Costa County. I represented 6 African American police officers in a race discrimination case against the city of Richmond. And I did that. I took over the case a year before the trial because it had been going on for years. And frankly, I did it. It's a very tough county to try a race discrimination case in, particularly in Martinez. It was an all-white jury, and all 6 of my clients were black. But I did it because I really felt it was the right thing to do. And sometimes I strangely take cases because it's the right thing to do, not necessarily because I think I'm going to make a lot of money for them. I represented a woman against UPS who had been double demoted after working there 30 years. It was a gender discrimination case. I won that case in the Federal District Court and won an appeal of it in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I represented a guy named Rick, who I believe was the first straight male against gay male sex harassment case ever tried in San Francisco. And if you know the culture in San Francisco, you'll know what a big deal that was. That was against Winterland Company, the company that had been started by Bill Graham. And I won that trial. And most recently, I represented a young man. He's 16 now. He was 12 when I took on the case. And this is probably my most interesting case. It's against the Palo Alto Unified School District. It's still going on, but I just won a case in an appeal in the Ninth Circuit. And this young man was told he was going to have to transfer schools from one side of the city to the other, making just completely putting his life in an uproar, and his parents' life, for transportation and other reasons. And the reason the school gave for needing to transfer him was he was the carrier of 2 genetic markers for a disease which he may or may not ever contract, solely because he carried genetic markers. The school contended that he was a medical danger to 2 other students in the school. There's no science behind that, and ultimately that's what happened. So those are the nature of the kind of cases that I take on. The last one involves a raccoon. If anybody wants to hear about it, talk to me after I speak. So why am I here? Here I am in part of Los Angeles, here in Southern California, and the district I'm running to be elected in is up in San Francisco. And none of you, so far as I know, can vote for me here. So why am I here talking to you? I'm here because my election, Jaffe versus Pelosi, in 2018, in June is the primary, is, I believe, the most single important congressional election in the United States. And it's not because of who I am, although I like to think it was. It's because of who my opponent is. Nancy Pelosi is the symbol representing the corporate greed and democratic elitist policies that I believe most of you here don't like and oppose. I believe that is to be the case. And therefore, if I can come close to her and finish second in the primary, which I have every intention of doing, finishing strongly second in the primary, then because of California's top 2 primary rules, the general election in November will be 2 candidates, me and her. And all the other candidates, the Green Party, the Peace and Freedom Party, the Republican Party, all the other ones will drop off the ballot. And I will get all their votes because Ms. Pelosi is not popular with any of them. And I'm in this to win it. I'm not doing it to make a name. I'm too old to do that. And I'm doing it to win it. And I'm doing it because the people of San Francisco deserve a voice in the United States Congress, and they do not have one. Right now, they have a representative who is living in an isolated bubble of privilege and arrogance. She is profoundly disconnected from her constituents. I have been walking around talking to thousands of people in San Francisco for the last couple of years in anticipation when I started to first think about this. And she is just disconnected with them completely. She has no idea what they want, and she does not represent them. The best example of that I can give you is a subject which I think is probably familiar with all of you, the single payer issue. I would say 70 to 80% of the registered Democrats in San Francisco, and probably about 65 to 70% of everybody, all the voters in San Francisco, want single payer. Nancy Pelosi is the biggest impediment in the United States to the passage of single payer in this country. She not only does not support it, she affirmatively blocks it. How do I know this? How do I know she does it? Because she'll tell you she doesn't. She never endorsed 562 in the state. She did not co-sponsor 676, which is John Conyers' bill, pending in the House of Representatives. Right now, she won't co-sponsor it for single payer. She will not join or endorse Bernie Sanders' new bill in the Senate, 1804, I think I got it right that time, for single payer. And why does she do this? There's an obvious answer. She does it because she gets money from industries and companies which have a very large stake in preventing the passage of single payer. The insurance industries, the healthcare industries, and big pharma. And she likes to brag about how much money she raises for the Democrats, and she does raise a lot of money. But that's not, you have to look a little deeper than just, here's the number. You have to look at where the money is coming from and what she's giving up to get the money. And what she's giving up is her vote. She's voting for her donors, not for her constituents. So I am running to give a voice to the people and the voters of San Francisco, which they have not had for a long time now, and I think which they richly deserve. I made some notes about some of the recent comments Ms. Pelosi made publicly, and this is within the last few months. I'm not reaching back years. Within the last few days, she said, wouldn't it be wonderful if Mitt Romney was president? About a week ago, when she was asked what she thought about the challenges that some of the Democratic congresspeople are making of her leadership in Congress, she said, I'm not going to waste my time thinking or addressing that issue. She says that a woman's right to control her body, her words are, is fading as an issue in the Democratic Party. She refuses to oppose fracking, which will destroy the economy. Sorry, the environment. Might destroy the economy also. All right. The list goes on and on to show you how out of touch she is, really, with reality. With reality. So I am here tonight asking for your endorsement. And the reason I want to get your endorsement is because when I beat her, when I take her on, when I finish strongly second in the primary and take her on, it is going to send a wave, a shockwave of encouragement across the United States to every progressive candidate out there. Because I will have taken down, I was going to say the head of the snake, but that's not nice. The person at the very top of what we all oppose. So I seek the endorsement of your club, and I hope I'll have a chance to answer questions. I'd much rather talk to people than listen to myself talk. So, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask me? Somebody's got to have a question.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me a hard question. Yes, sir.
What are your ideas on attacking income inequality?
Repeat the question.
Pardon?
Repeat the question.
Not louder.
Oh, he wants to know my idea of attacking income inequality. First, I should say, and I'm going to ask my campaign manager, Lily, to pass out my platform sitting out there, I think. So you'll detailed on all my issues. The destruction and the disappearing of the middle class is horrible, and I am against it. I and my cousin Bob, who's sitting here, who's about my age, we grew up and we remember a time in the 50s and 60s which was the most prosperous time the United States has ever had, the 50s and the 60s. And during that time, when a single job holder could support a whole family without working 2 jobs, does anybody know what the top income tax bracket was?
91.
That's right, 91%. The more you earned, the more you paid. I propose to put another graduated tax back into the law. The taxes that are now only feed the 1% or the 1/10 of 1%. We need our middle class back, and we need our prosperity back.
Here.
And, I couldn't feel maybe I'll get my sheet. And are there any other issues that? Yes, sir.
So, actually, the first time I heard Nancy Pelosi speak, I was a medical student in San Francisco in '93 or '94, and I wasn't that impressed then either. But I've been thinking a lot lately about primary challenges from the left in the Democratic Party, and that there are sort of what forms the sort of solid basis for doing that. And I'll say that a couple things have come to mind, and one of them you just did very effectively, which is to lay out a strong case for what's wrong with this incumbent. Because there's a lot of people out there trying to fight, Republicans, but your case is very strong, and I appreciate that. I've seen other candidates recently sort of fail to do that. There's another piece that I think is sort of important, which is to what extent, as an activist or in other ways in your district, have you sort of worked with that member of Congress to try to see if, in this case, she will do things different? In other words, have you, what's been your, you understand why I'm saying that's important? In other words, the first thing is, I'd like Democrats to vote like Democrats, not like Republicans. So one of the first things to do is ask them to do that. Have you done it?
Oh yes, I've done it, and so have a lot of other people have done it. She is so well entrenched and so isolated, and I call it siloed, that it's very difficult to get into direct communications with her. I've talked to her people. I go to DCCC meetings in San Francisco all the time, and they're not listening. They're not listening. It's I guess it's a kind of cognitive dissonance for them. They hear something they don't like and they just dismiss it. She thinks she knows better than everybody at this point. And
so in other words, it's like the nature of your activism has been to do things like call her staff and go to public events where she's present, or like flesh out the nature of your activism.
Well, if you want to know what I've done in my activism, I have been politically active for about 5 years. I have worked on various campaigns for progressives. I was really inspired by Bernie Sanders. I worked very hard in this campaign, gave him a lot of money, and I was recruited by his national campaign to go to the state of Nevada to legally supervise what turned out to be chaotic Nevada caucuses.
Just 5 more minutes, okay?
Okay,
5 more minutes.
that's fine. And I am known as a Bernie-crat. I was endorsed by the San Francisco Bernie-crats, as you will see if you look at my paperwork here. And I was endorsed by the National Veterans for Bernie. And my platform, I think, is wholly on the progressive side of pretty much every issue that you care to talk about. I've talked to Nancy Pelosi's lieutenants. I've tried to talk to her daughter, who Nancy wants to hand the seat off to in 2020. She feels an entitlement to do that. Christine, yes, Christine Pelosi. Just the way her father handed the mayorship of Baltimore off to her brother. It's a family thing for her, and she feels entitled to hand it off to whoever she wants. It's my intention to kind of wreck that plan for her. So, I feel very good about my credentials as an activist. Trying to get her to change her ways at this point, I think, is I've done it. I think it's pretty futile, to be honest with you. Anything else? Yes, sir.
When you get elected and go
Thank
to
you.
Congress, would you pledge to introduce a bill to end outlaw reparative therapy? Reparative therapy is...
You'll have to define that for me.
Yeah,
So
reparative therapy is what the Christian right uses to ungay the gay in people. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you as a lawyer, from what I know about, the gay cure and all this, from what I know about the tactics that are used by them, it's already illegal. I would seek to have district attorneys enforce the law, because what they're doing to these kids is child abuse. And I would try to have that
I'm saying
prosecuted.
national law. It's illegal here in the state of California for minors, but I'm saying a national law that blankets, I don't care if you're of age or underage.
Well, it's a very tricky subject on the national level for a couple of reasons. One, you start to tread on First Amendment rights of exercise, freedom of exercise of religion, but more importantly, most of the laws pertaining to what most of us think of as the crimes, murder, rape, robbery, or so on, are all state laws.
Mm-hmm.
There are not a lot of federal laws on crimes that occur in everyday life. Would I agree with such a law? Absolutely. Would I try to get it passed? Yes. It would be tricky, to be candid with you. Yes, sir.
I read your policy statement here, and I'm sure it was I just want to ask you about, because I'm a proud union member, and I want to make sure I at least ask the question, how can you in Congress strengthen union membership?
Well, I think the NLRB has to be reinforced and reinvigorated in terms of enforcing the law. I believe in unions very strongly. I grew up, and my cousin Bob is here again. We grew up in what was probably the strongest union town that's ever existed in the country, which was Detroit when the UAW ran it. And that's where a lot of my progressivism comes from. And I believe in unions, and I certainly would support them. It's hard to focus on a particular act unless you give me more specifics, but I assure you I'm very much pro-union. All right, so I'm going to close now because I think my time is about up.
You have 1 minute and a half.
1 minute and a half. Nancy Pelosi has not acknowledged my campaign or even my existence. It's my intention to embarrass and shame her into debating me, because Nancy does not speak well extemporaneously. She speaks scripted, and if I am fortunate enough to get her to debate me, I think that it will greatly magnify my chances of beating her in the general election. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Michael Bracamontes. Did I say your name right?
You did.
Okay, great. Why don't you introduce yourself and go for it?
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Bracamontes. I'm running for governor as a Democrat, as a progressive social justice candidate. I'm not accepting any corporate money. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. And another thing to add on to that, I think it's important for candidates to also say that if elected, they would continue to not accept corporate donations in office and moving forward in future campaigns. I grew up in Los Angeles. I've attended public schools from kindergarten through law school, down the street. But a couple cities over at Garfield High School is where I attended. Went to undergrad at UC Irvine. I met my wife down there. She's from Central California, from Tulare, in between Fresno and Bakersfield. While in school, we had our son, who's 17 years old now. So I worked full time, about 35 hours a week. The last 2 years of undergrad, took a full course load. So I understand what it's like to work hard while you're a student. She's been an educator for 14 years as a high school teacher, and then later as a vice principal at a middle school. She got her master's in education from UC Berkeley. I got my law degree from UC Berkeley, and we've been up in the Bay for the past 15 years or so. I'm a civil rights attorney. I've been practicing for 11 years. I've had my own firm for 9 years, and we do housing cases. And in housing cases, we exclusively represent tenants against their landlords, habitability cases, mold, fire, carbon monoxide exposure, things of that nature, retaliation. In employment cases, we do racial discrimination, sexual harassment, and we also handle police brutality cases. And like Stephen said, we're a rare breed, I think, in terms of being attorneys. We take cases that we believe in. I can assure you that many of the police brutality cases are not high-dollar cases, but those are important cases for attorneys to take. They serve a social utility, and where you have bad actors in the police department, you want them to be held accountable. You want citizens to make complaints. You want people to file lawsuits, because hopefully at the end of the day, you can get those bad actors off the streets. So those are the types of cases I've handled. I've been pretty active in terms of being a social justice advocate. We've handled cases for the HIV positive and AIDS positive communities. In 2010, I was the AIDS Legal Referral Panel Attorney of the Year. I've co-counseled on a number of cases with California Rural Legal Assistance, which is one of the largest nonprofit legal assistance providers in the country. We've handled cases with them up and down the state. Usually it's habitability related, more tenant stuff. And that's what I've dedicated my career to. So in terms of looking at this race, there weren't any non-establishment, non-corporate money candidates running for office. And some of the issues that I'm advocating for, nobody else is talking about. So with respect to housing, I think we need a statewide rent control. We need statewide just cause eviction protections. We need to repeal Costa-Hawkins and the Alice Act. We're in a huge housing crisis. The legislature's been patting themselves on the back recently for passing that $4 billion affordable housing bond when they acknowledge that $250 billion of affordable housing is needed. So this isn't an issue that we can easily build our way out of in the short term. We need to legislate and step in. And we've, as a law firm, we've handled a lot of phone calls from people who have been living in the same place for 25, 35 years. They get some new landlord or new real estate investment firm takes over their property, and they jack up their rent from $1,000 to $3,000. And these are the people that built that community, that made that neighborhood what it is. They've raised families there. They've been there for decades, and they're getting pushed out of their homes. And we hear a lot about gentrification, but I call it community displacement, because that's what it really is. And people are just getting pushed out further and further out from the places that they grew up in, and it's not right. So we need somebody who understands that in office, and who's going to tackle the big real estate developers, the apartment associations that are going to throw a lot of money against any type of effort to establish this. The Los Angeles Times had an article about a month ago that said if rent went up 5%, there would be 2,000 more homeless people on the streets. And so when we're talking about this housing crisis, we've all seen the explosion in homelessness over the past 10 years. Places where you drive down see a freeway overpass with one person sleeping under there. Now you see entire encampments, and that's the same everywhere. Los Angeles, San Diego, Modesto, San Francisco, Sacramento. It's all across the state. It's a huge problem. Even in rich places like Palo Alto, there are people sleeping in their cars along the streets in front of Stanford University. So we need to be serious and act with the sense of urgency when we're talking about the housing crisis. Another thing we need, and I think that contributes to this problem, because a lot of these things are interrelated, is a livable wage. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, but in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was kind of the bargain, right? That as a productive member of society working one job, you could afford to put a roof over your head, have a car, and have the necessities for your family. But that's not true today. We have a lot of people in this state who are working 2-3 jobs to make ends meet, and usually it's both people in the household who are working 2 jobs, and that's not good for families. It's not good when people aren't raising their kids because they're always at work trying to make a buck. It's not good for marriages, and it speaks to what we value as a society, where we know that the wages have not kept pace with the cost of housing, with the cost of education, with the cost of daily necessities. So again, we can't just leave the free market to do its thing on its own, because that's where we ended up today. And right now we have the greatest gap in income inequality that we've ever had as a nation. So this is another area that we need to legislate, and we need to step in and say, no, this isn't what we want to do as a society. We want something better for our families and for our children. We want everybody to be able to work one job and have these things and live a full life. The other areas that I've been talking about that no other candidate is with respect to criminal justice reform, I handle police brutality cases. And one thing that's always struck me about those cases is that police are not required to use the minimum amount of force when they're effectuating an arrest. So when we file these lawsuits, and I've had judges tell me, the case law tells me, they'll say, well, counsel, things got a little out of hand here, but the officer's not required to use the minimum amount of force to get the job done. They can use up to an unreasonable amount of force. So what that does is it informs how the police officers are trained, because when we depose police officers, when I've deposed police practices experts, they say, well, given the circumstance, I'll use the most amount of force I legally am entitled to. So if you move that bar down to the minimum amount of force, now they're trained in a different way to conform with that new standard. And nobody ever talks about that. In the past 2 years, we've seen a lot of police brutality, a lot of police shooting cases in the media. And politicians will go out there, they'll hold a press conference and say, well, we need better police community relations. They don't malign the police, and that's true, that part. But no one ever offers a solution on what do we do to change the law to address these structural problems that enable these events to keep occurring over and over and over again. So those are the types of solutions that I'm trying to bring forward and to talk about, and that nobody else is. In that same vein, I think we need to ban for-profit prisons. It's completely immoral that we have companies and individuals profiting off of keeping primarily brown and black folks incarcerated. Southern California ACLU had issued a statistic a few weeks ago that said 63% of the people currently incarcerated in California haven't been convicted of a crime yet. They just can't afford bail. And Alameda County, it's even higher. It's 80%. And so you have these companies who are profiting. They're making money off of this stuff. And it also feeds into the immigration enforcement, enforcement that we have, and that these are private detention centers that are making money off of this stuff. The Department of Justice issued a report in 2016 that compared for-profit and privately run prisons with government-run prisons. And the privately run prisons have higher incidence of inmate-on-inmate assaults and inmate-on-staff assaults. And we can all guess why, right? They're trying to make a buck, so they probably have less guards. Their guards are not trained as well, and somebody's making a profit. The cost of housing an inmate since 2005 has doubled. over $75,000 a year to house an inmate in California.
Crazy.
And so when we're talking about these big things we want to do, like doing away with college tuition as we know it today, getting single payer, and we hear these opposition arguments saying we can't afford it, that it's completely wrong. The money's there. We need the political will to have somebody to stand up to these corporate interests who will, they're not concerned with their political career, right? Because that's one of the big things when we're talking about why it's important to have a corporate-free candidate. That means that they're going to do the right thing. They're going to not be afraid of having big money in their ear. They're not going to be afraid of having corporate money come up against them in the next election cycle. And it's one thing that inspired me. It inspired Stephen when we saw Bernie Sanders collecting all of these small dollar donations. He's collecting regular people's time and energy and money. It's something that is going to, thank you. It's going to push us forward in a direction that we need to go. And I'll just hit a couple of bullet points on some of the other issues real quick with respect to charter schools. Again, similar to the prison industry, the privatization of public education is the exact wrong way that we should be going. Public schools are not failing in Beverly Hills or San Marino or Palo Alto. All right, so this isn't an issue where people are saying, well, throwing money at the problem is not going to work. Well, you look at the highly funded schools, the ones that have the resources, they always do pretty good. And I was at the MPE conference last week or 2 weeks ago, and there was a San Diego school board member who was talking about it, and he said, California used to be number 6 in the nation in terms of per pupil spending. Now we're number 42, but our graduation rates have gone up. We're doing better in terms of closing the achievement gap in San Diego between minority students and white students. So we're doing better. We know how to finish closing that achievement gap. We need smaller classrooms. We need to retain teachers for longer periods. But you have these charter schools coming in, siphoning money off of the public school districts. So one thing that I think the next governor needs to do, and that I would do, is call for a repeal of these charter schools and really go 100% and reinvest in the public education system. And I would say I'm the only gubernatorial candidate that's attended public school, K through law school, and I put my kids in public school. A lot of politicians, a lot of rich people will say, well, public school, that's for other people. I'm going to put my kid in private school. But I'm a big believer in public education. I think education is a great equalizer in society. It's how we get social mobility. And going to college tuition real quick, how we frame that argument, I think, is going to be how we're able to get that done. So when I talk to older voters who went to college in the 60s and 70s, I remind them that, because at first they say, oh, free college, I don't like that. Nothing's free, you guys got to work, you're lazy. I say, well, no, the young adults today, they're working pretty hard, but if they're coming out of school with 6 figures in debt and their school loan payment is $1,000 to $1,500, that was not a burden you guys had. So we're not asking for a handout or an entitlement. We want the same opportunity that you guys had back in the 60s and 70s, where there wasn't any college tuition. There was room and board and some kind of nominal registration fee, and that was it. And also you want to talk about how it's a great investment for the state. And this other well-known attorney was telling me, he goes, look, I went to school for almost free, and I've paid millions of dollars in taxes throughout the course of my career. So it's an investment in our adults' right, and we'll get that back in revenue. We want people to have good jobs. We want them to have the education and get this stuff done. And so I'll hit the last of my bullet points because I know I'm running short. Twin Tunnels project, I don't like that. It's an $18 billion project. Boondoggle, exactly. And there's no government construction project of that scale that ever finishes on time, ever finishes on budget, not to mention the environmental impact. I think we need a public bank. North Dakota's got great returns on having a public bank. We need to look into with that, I'll say that we have very, very serious issues that we need to tackle as a state. They're too important to leave to corporate Democrats who can be bought and who are concerned with keeping their big money donors happy, because we know that they will say one thing when they're on the campaign trail, but when they get in office and they've got a conflict between doing what's right for the community and keeping their big money donors happy, they stick with the big money donors 10 out of 10 times, and that's what we need to get past, and that's why I'm asking for your support. And with that, I'll take any questions you have. Thank you.
Environment, fracking.
Ban fracking.
What's
SB 562. I'm for that. You guys could have guessed all that stuff based on the where I was at on the other.
I have a
Yes.
question. So next month, one of your opponents is coming to us, and I'm just kind of curious. I don't know, where do you? So Delaney Easton, and Kevin DeLeon is now. No wait, am I good?
Senate? He's Senate.
Never mind. Okay.
Just
Can you
Delaney.
delete that?
Delaney.
Yeah, Delaney Easton. Okay. So where do you guys differ?
Yeah. So, one, I don't think Delaney Easton or any other gubernatorial candidate has talked about statewide rent control, just cause eviction, Costa Hawkins, Alice. So that would be a big one. The police training reform that I'm talking about, no one's ever said anything along those lines. And the charter school issue, Villaraigosa wants to increase the number of charter schools. Eli Broad's a big contributor of his, and who's called for 50% of LAUSD kids to be enrolled in charters in the next few years. Newsom takes tons of money from charter schools. Delaney's been on the board of a charter school for almost a decade. So I think in that regard, if you're concerned about public education, keeping that public, and I think that's certainly one of the areas that we need to invest in and keep away from the profiteers. Those are three big areas in which I differ. One other quick thing that I'll mention, I did a video the other day. So if as you can tell, these same issues that I'm talking about, I practice law in these areas, and I've litigated hundreds of cases, and so I'm always looking for ways where you can tweak a law to affect change on a mass scale. So I did a video the other day on sexual assault, sexual harassment cases, and this is kind of stemmed from the Me Too hashtag, and I was watching Tirana, who started that about 10 years ago. She was on Good Morning America, and I was thinking about, so Bill Cosby's a great example of this, where he had 60 women accusing him of sexual assault. Common sense tells us this happened. No one has 60 women accusing them of something without it happening. But in the trial in Pennsylvania, only one other woman was allowed to testify in that trial. So I would propose a change to the evidence code where if you've got sexual assault victims or sexual harassment victims, survivors who are making the same claim against an individual, that they're allowed to testify. Because right now it would be all up to that one judge, and it's an evidentiary ruling. So making that tweak in the law would, one, make it easier to hold these harassers and predators accountable, and two, make it easier to find an attorney to pursue this stuff and make it easier to prevail. So nobody else has ever said anything along those lines, and I think that's where I differ in that I'm trying to offer as specific a solution as I can to the issues in these areas, housing, employment, criminal justice, and whatnot. Back to you. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the reasons why I support you so much, and I really truly believe in your ability to lead this state, is not only because of the and the choices that you would make, but also because of your background. And I think that's one of the most important things for you to share. And I would love to hear a little bit about who you are and where you come from and why it is important that you as an individual and your background especially is part of who you are and makes it who you are. So if you could explain that, I think that would be really important.
Sure. I'm the eldest of 5 kids. My dad's a truck driver. My mom's a pharmacist. My mom's Chinese. My dad's Mexican and Native American. So, I'm Meganese to a certain extent. I've got 2 kids, 17 and 13. I'm trying to get through these teenage years as best I can. But I understand hard work. I understand that not everybody has the same opportunities when we start out, and I think part of what we like about America is that there's an ideal of meritocracy, and we say, well, if you work hard, you can get ahead and you can have the American dream. And it's okay to acknowledge right now that that's not the case. We have plenty of people who are working hard, but they're not going to have the same social mobility that there once was. And it's okay to say that things are unfair for a lot of people across the board. And we can find commonality, we can find common ground, whether it's in the cities, whether it's in rural areas, whether it's in rich areas or poor areas. There are ways that we can work together. Everybody knows that housing costs are out of control. I've been all over the state now, and nobody ever says, "Oh, housing's fine, Mike. It's good over here. We're good." Housing's out of control. Everybody wants a decent job. Everybody wants good. They want access to quality education for their kids. Everybody wants to be treated fairly by the police. So if we find those commonalities and we can work together on putting a plan together so that we can move forward together.
Do you want to take 2 more questions?
Sure.
And he'll be here for the potluck, so we should.
I will be here for the potluck.
I just wanted to hear a little bit more about where you stand on environmental issues. Because I don't know if you've seen the Sierra Club introduced or sent a letter to all candidates with 5 or so points on the environmental issues, and I just wanted to see where you stand on that.
I have not seen the Sierra Club letter, but just real quick in bullet point fashion, banning fracking, banning acidization, forced water extraction, 2,500 foot setbacks. I think we need to increase our march toward renewables. We're doing a good job on that, but we could do a little better because we're ahead of schedule right now. I think I said stopping the Twin Tunnels project. Anything else in particular?
Big oil and protecting our natural resources here.
Absolutely. I think we need to tax oil extraction, get big money oil out of the process to the democratic process to the maximum extent that we can. Speaking of big oil, it makes me think of Chevron, and that makes me think of Prop 13. And I think it's time. There's no reason why billion-dollar oil companies should have any type of tax break or tax benefit or tax loophole. So looking at Prop 13 to help fund some of these things like affordable college, and we've got single payer coming down that I fully support. So looking at Prop 13 for these commercial properties is something that I want to support.
You're saying closing the commercial property loophole.
Right.
Yeah.
So you won me over. I like you. You seem very genuine. You're on the right side of all the issues. How are you going to get your name out there? And I applaud you for being youngish and stepping up. You look very young.
I lotion every night. So
But I mean, they tell us all young people need to step up, but we're always up against nobody knows us. How do we win elections? Our name isn't out there. So what is your strategy?
Okay. So I get a couple different questions. One is how much money you raise, and the money's the microphone for the message. But really, what we're talking about is name recognition and spreading the message, right? Because back in the 90s, you could only buy TV ads. That was the only way to get your message out. you had to raise $10-20 million. That was mandatory. In a non-presidential year gubernatorial race, and I looked at the Arnold Schwarzenegger race because nobody really ran against Jerry Brown. The top two Democrats, Phil Angelides and Steve Wesley, got 1.2 million and 1 million votes respectively. I was shocked by how low that number was. I said, that's a mediocre YouTube video nowadays. So if I'm a YouTube video away, I feel. If anyone has an idea, I'm happy to field those at the potlucks. But I was talking to a musician friend of mine who's, he's not super huge, but he's got some songs on the radio, and I told him that number, and his eyes lit up, and he said, Mike, my downloads and streams have 400 million. He goes, this is doable. I said, I know it's doable. It's a matter of us, organizing ourselves, and it's a combination of things, right? In terms, you can't just rely on social media, which is why I'm here today, and which is why I've been everywhere that I can go. Anybody who's willing to listen and give me a microphone, I'll show up and I'll do my thing, so that we have people who aren't on social media receiving the message, and we're going to roll out some things in the first part of next year that I think will really up my visibility. So, and Stephen Jaffe, Gail McLaughlin, David Hildebrand, and myself, we've been making a couple joint appearances. We've got one coming up in San Francisco that's likely going to be moderated by the political writer at the SF Chronicle. So we're doing this thing where we've got the progressive candidates making joint appearances to help raise our profile together, and I think that's going to be hugely important and helpful as we move forward throughout the process. And the last thing I'll say is, I got in the race about 4 months ago. Everybody else has been running for a year. Gavin's been running for 10 years for governor. So, I'm in the beginning process in comparison to everyone else, but I think as we head into Q1 of next year, I'll have my profile a little higher.
Have you approached TYT or Justice Democrats or Brandon Congress?
Justice Democrats and Brandon Congress, I believe, are only focused on federal races, so no is the short answer to that. I haven't yet, but it's on the list.
You gotta get on there.
All right. What was that?
You gotta get on there. You're a young sir. You gotta be on there.
Send up a message. All right. That's it for me. Thank you for your time, everyone.
I'd like to thank both speakers for coming down and That being said, in terms of endorsement, although I enjoy both speakers and hearing their point of view, I'm glad they came down and are running for these offices. They're very important, and to come visit our club. We have to hear from the other candidates. They must
You
be.
get Nancy Pelosi here, I'll come.
But as a club, we have to allow the other candidates to have an opportunity to either speak or send a proxy to speak for them, or even submit a letter and have it read at the meeting. And so once that's done, we allow the other side, the other candidates, to be heard or allowed to be heard. And then we'll take up the endorsements. So thank you.
All right. It's time for a stack. So yeah, anybody would like to get first of all,
Okay, folks, you heard it here at the Feel the Burn Dem Club, where Stephen Jaffe and Michael Bracamontes, the two corporate free candidates, or I should say two of the corporate free candidates that I am supporting, have just spoken. They really wowed the crowd here. I think everybody was really impressed with what they had to say, and I would encourage any of you who are watching this video to please share this stream. Being that they're corporate free candidates, obviously they need help getting their message out. California is a huge state, and share this on your personal pages, in any groups you belong to, and talk them up. And let's see, I don't know where I'm going to be broadcasting next from this week. I know that there's going to be several things that I'm going to do, and follow my Facebook page to find out more. So for now, I'm signing off from Glendale here at the Feel the Burn Dem Club, and have a great week. And keep fighting.